Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. The Dark World structure deck just recently dropped in the TCG. I still can't believe accession is a real word, but they aren't the only ones getting a new stack of predetermined cards. Forest of the Traptrix launched not too long ago in the OCG, so I guess we gotta cover those. So, premiering in the August 2013 core set, Judgment of the Light, Traptrix are a series of anthropomorphic moe blobs that are based on a number of ambush predators, be they insectoid or flora. Which is appropriate because they tie into another archetype of cards, whole normal trap cards, more colloquially known as trap holes. Yeah, if you thought it was weird when I had to refer to the interdimensional portals in the Albaz lore as holes, then strap yourselves in, because we're going to have to cover them as well to really cover the entire scope of the Traptrix strategy.
Does that mean there's gonna be plot holes? We're seriously not gonna talk about how unholy it is that you've gone this far with no jokes? Holy guacamole, Batman! Like, seriously, this archetype is a hole-in-one. Someone contact Shia LaBeouf, because we got holes in this script! Like, come on. Traptrix in the body shop, doing something unholy.
Are you trying to get me copyright striked? Anyway, which was actually pretty prevalent for its time, making up a key component of the infamous hat deck, the other parts being the hands and the artifacts, another archetype we're definitely gonna have to cover one of these days. It was so iconic that they actually put those cards in the new structure deck. Now, I can pretty easily trace my frustration with control decks in general to this theme. Trying to get over the seemingly infinite disruption this deck could provide was infuriating, and I've been on a quest of vengeance ever since. But this video isn't about me, it's about the tricky residents of the forest who seek to lure you into an early grave. So let's cautiously take notes on these bloodthirsty Gajinkas, catalog the various kinds of holes they use in their endeavors, then see if there are any other predators out there looking to join into this very staycation style of hunting. It's time to tiptoe around Traptrix. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what I do. Once we get to 50k, we'll be doing our next 5Ds video on Akiza, and every sub helps. Also, check out my Discord, where someone finally made a Luber the Boober of Duber, and my Twitch, where you can watch me put all my lessons to the test live. And if you want to go that extra mile, join my Patreon, where you can get my videos early, help us reach these video milestones, and become part of the credits like these lovely people. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So what's the deal with Traptrix? Well, they're a series of level or rank 4 earth attribute plant or insect type monsters, and they focus on utilizing trap cards to their absolute fullest. The main deck monsters are all immune to the effects of whole normal trap cards. After all, it'd be super embarrassing if you fell for the same trap you set up, while the extra deck monsters are immune to all trap effects under certain, though easily met, conditions. Oh, and all the non-link monsters have stats that total up to 2800, but I'm not sure what the significance of that is. Let's start with our insect main deck monsters first, and in alphabetical order, we've got Traptrix Arachnacampa. They have 1300 attack and 1500 defense, and during the main phase, if you control a Traptrix monster as a quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, except insect and plant monsters. And the first time each set card in your spell and trap card zone would be destroyed by card effect each turn, it is not. Ooh, that's pretty nasty. When used on your turn though, it does limit your access to the rank 4 toolbox, something the archetype is actually fairly good at using. So it's probably best that you save this for your opponent's turn, since it's a quick effect. When they try to lightning storm your back row, then BAM! You quick summon Arachnacampa, keeping your back row safe, and forcing your opponent to have even more back row removal to play around you. Then, as long as it sticks around, you can use Campa here as material for anything you want. It's so good in fact, that Arachnacampa might make your opponent develop arachnophobia. Traptrix Atrax has 1800 attack and 1000 defense, and allows you to activate whole normal trap cards directly from your hand, and the activation and effects of normal trap cards activated on your side of the field can't be negated. Wow, wild, just wild. It didn't see much play back in the day because it didn't actually get you any cards, plus negation wasn't as prevalent as it was today, but nowadays it's a great way to spring a ton of surprises on your opponent without having to commit anything to the board. And while it only lets you activate whole normal trap cards from your hand, it does give their protection to all normal trap cards, so anything off theme is covered as well. And honestly, considering all trap card themes love running the classic staples, that tracks. Traptrix Mantis has 1500 attack and 1300 defense, and when this card is normal summoned, you can add a Traptrix monster from your deck to your hand. And once per turn, as a quick effect, you can target a set spell or trap card you control and return that target to the hand, then you can set a spell or trap card from your hand. That might seem like a do-nothing effect, and by itself, yeah, it basically is, but there are some tangible benefits to it. An effect we'll be talking about later on ends up banishing your set cards after a certain period of time, but if you aren't able to activate them by then, you can use Mantis to scoop them up and either reset them or replace it with a new card. Either way, it'll get rid of that lingering effect. It also helps those cards dodge targeting removal, or even non-targeting removal, since you can choose to just not reset a card. Mantis also contributes to our long-term consistency by searching us any other Traptrix on normal summon, which is just really splendid. You don't have to worry about finding them randomly off the top of your deck, just leave all the praying to Mantis. Traptrix Myrmelio has 1600 attack and 1200 defense, and when normal summoned, you can add a whole normal trap card from your deck to your hand. And if this card is special summoned, you can target a spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy that target. Notably, this effect is mandatory, so you have to do it even if your opponent doesn't have any spells or traps. Very funny, but also has some niche applications we'll get back to later. However, the big draw here is their normal summon effect, granting you access to any whole normal trap card from your deck. And as the roster has expanded over the years, they've gained access to some delicious options. Though it's hard to beat the gold standard, bottomless trap hole. Maybe even treacherous trap hole if you're feeling daring. Myrmelio is easily one of our strongest monsters, giving you great access to your cards when first arriving, then providing ways to deal with your opponent's background every time they come back. And no wonder they get the lion's share of the attention. Alright, that's all of our insects, now it's time for the plants, starting with Traptrix Dionea. They have 1700 attack and 1100 defense, and when normal summoned, you can target a Traptrix monster in your grave and special summon that target in defense position. And when this card is special summoned, you can target a whole normal trap card in your grave and set that target, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn if it's still on the field. Dionea intersects with a lot of our other cards and gives them a bit more context. The trap hole resetting effect is greatly improved by Mantis's ability to swap them out, because while it's banished at the end of the turn, it doesn't say it gets banished if it leaves the field by any other means, which is awesome. And Myrmelio is one of Dionea's best revival targets, because you get that sweet back row removal before going into a rank 4. And because you can even target another copy of itself with that effect, you now have a vector towards getting a new trap hole that your opponent isn't going to have much fun with. They were right to model this after the Venus flytrap, because this card is out of this world. Traptrix Genlycia has 1200 attack and 1600 defense, and you contribute this card to set 2 whole normal trap cards with different names, one from your deck and one from your grave, but banish them when they leave the field. Now, this does not work with Mantis because it does apply a lingering banishing condition. But while it does come with a bit of setup as well as tossing those cards into the void, it's a pretty quick way to load your back row with threats that you can use to corkscrew around with your opponent. Traptrix Nepenthes has 800 attack and 2000 defense, and if you activate a whole normal trap card, except during the damage step, you can add to your hand or special summon a Traptrix monster from your deck except a copy of itself. Now this would have been way better if you could consistently summon it in defense position. And in fact, we'll see a remix of this effect that shows this might have been used under different circumstances. But for the time, this just wasn't doing it. By itself, Nepenthes was just an 800 attack normal summon that sat on your field, hoping that a trap hole card you had on hand was enough to keep them safe to get some value out of them. Once again, really cool effect to maintain your card advantage, I just don't think it had a very strong elevator pitch. Plant. Traptrix Pudica has 900 attack and 1900 defense, and when normal summoned, you can add a Traptrix Orchard from your deck to your hand, a field spell for the theme we'll get into later. If this card is special summoned, you can target an opponent's special summoned monster, banish it, and if you do, during the next standby phase, your opponent can special summon one of their banished monsters. So right off the bat, getting a hold of the field spell is going to be huge, no doubt about it. The removal effect though is a little funky. It seems quite similar to the temporary banishing effects of cards like Farfa, but it's different in a very important way. See, when those effects work, the monsters return to the field. They aren't special summoned back, and returning doesn't trigger any trap hole cards that care about a monster being summoned. Pudica flips the script on this, turning it into an actual honest-to-goodness banish that gives your opponent a legit summon from the banished zone, that in turn can be hit by trap hole cards. It's a little limited by the fact that it has to hit special summoned monsters, and allows your opponent to select whatever banished monster they have to summon back, and can potentially trigger on summon effects. It's a little risky, but as far as proactive removal options go in Traptrix, Pudica certainly isn't putrid. Traptrix Vesiculo has 1400 attack and defense, and you can send one set trap card you control to the grave to special summon this card from your hand. And if you control no cards in your spell and trap zone, you can banish this card from your grave, then target a whole normal trap card in your grave and set it to your field. It sucks to lose one of your valuable trap cards for just one summon, but if it's a Dionea situation where it might get banished otherwise, it's probably the better alternative. And unlike Arachnicampa, this doesn't lock you into any particular kind of summon. And then, later on, if you're hurting for back row, you can banish Vesiculo out of the grave to give your back row a little more bite, and potentially recycling the card you sent to grave for a Vesiculo special summon. So just like its namesake plant, this water wheel is really good at having your cards circle back to you. Alright, that's it for our main deck monsters. Now it's time for the ones living in the extra deck, and they're split into two camps, the Xyz and the Lynx, and we'll be starting with our higher ranked option first. Quick note about them, while they have Xyz material, these monsters are unaffected by all trap effects. Traptrix Allomeris is an insect Xyz monster with 2200 attack and 600 defense, requiring 2 or more level 4 monsters as material. It can detach 2 material to special summon a level 4 insect or plant monster from your grave, and if an opponent's monster leaves the field because of your card effect, and is now in the grave or banished except during the damage step, you can detach a material from this card, then target one of them to special summon to your field. So the more material you can tuck under this card, the more uses you can get out of it, but you'll still get plenty of mileage out of the bare minimum. You either get to revive a monster, or get 2 activations of robbing monsters out of your opponent's grave, which I think is pretty busted, but really depends on the quality of monster you're taking, especially because you're running the risk of giving your opponent more grave triggers. Still, feel free to use this card, just sparingly. It's not Allomeris it's cracked up to be. Traptrix Pinguicula is a plant Xyz monster with 2500 attack and 300 defense, requiring any 2 level 4 monsters as material, and in addition to being immune to trap effects while it has material, it's also unaffected by the activated effects of other monsters with the same type as any monster it has as material. They can also detach a material from this card to add a Traptrix monster from your deck to your hand, and if any number of monsters owned by your opponent is sent to the grave or banished by a card effect, you can attach one of them to this card as material. This has the same downside as Allomeris, where you could potentially give your opponent more grave triggers, but by scooping up those monsters, you can potentially make ping here a pseudo-towers against mono-type decks. Not to mention that while you have it, it's not in your opponent's grave, locking them out of any activated effects they might have there. And there's also the fact that this is a major consistency booster for the deck, searching you a Traptrix monster every turn. And let's not forget that very solid attack stat to help push for game. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with this one. I'm surprised I wasn't pinged about this sooner. Traptrix Rafflesia is a plant Xyz monster with 300 attack and 2500 defense, requiring any 2 level 4 monsters as material. While on the field, Traptrix monsters you control, except copies of itself, can't be destroyed by battle, card effect, nor can they be targeted by your opponent. And during either player's turn, you can detach an Xyz material from this card and send a whole normal trap card that meets its activation conditions from your deck to the grave to have this effect become that trap card's effect when that card is activated. Oh boy, was this card a menace on release. It's an amazing boon to Traptrix, obviously, but because it was generic, every deck that could make rank 4s now had a monster that was any trap hole in their deck at any time. People ran the gamut from the classic bottomless to only running Treacherous Trap Hole as a quick double pop to the pendulum-slaying space-time trap hole. And while their era of dominance has long since faded, in their native deck, Rafflesia is even better because it has that blanket protection effect. Heck, that was something I'd even forgotten about. Trust me, when you see this card, you better run for the hills and pray your opponent doesn't chain Torrential Tribute on summon to spite you. Unlike its namesake, this card definitely doesn't stink. Okay, now it's time for the links, who are all unaffected by trap effects as long as they've been link summoned. First up is Traptrix Sarah, a link 1 plant monster with 800 attack, requiring any one non-link Traptrix monster as material. If a normal trap card is activated, either yours or your opponent's, you can special summon a Traptrix monster from your deck with a different name than the cards you control. And if your other Traptrix monster's effect is activated, you can set a whole normal trap card directly from your deck. This sets up a very vicious cycle where a normal trap card is activated, triggering Sarah's effect to summon a Traptrix, and if that monster has an effect on summon, that triggers Sarah again to set a whole normal trap from your deck, and those cards can easily help keep Sarah on board for many turns, which means more and more advantage. Notably, Myrmileo is always a good option for this, because even if your opponent has no back row to target, it's a mandatory effect, ensuring you get the trigger off of Sarah, even if it is for no value. Not only are they just a better version of Nepenthes, simply by dint of doing more things, it also solves it in a way that Link 1s are particularly adept at doing. It doesn't matter that Sarah does nothing on its own, that's what the Link material used to summon them is for. If you normal summon Myrmileo and get the search, then you've already advanced your game plan. From that point, you can effectively mode change them into a different effect, which can really rev up your engine now that you have all the pieces you need. True, it has the same attack power as Nepenthes and can't go to defense position to take advantage of a great 2000 defense stat, but that's the trade-off, I suppose. Though if there was one thing about this card I would change, it'd be giving them a box of Claritin up. Look at all this mucus everywhere. Are they like having a cold or something? Traptrix Cularia is a link 2 plant monster with 1800 attack, requiring 2 insect and or plant monsters as material. After you activate a whole normal trap card, you can set it instead of sending it to the grave. And during your end phase, you can target a Traptrix monster in your grave and special summon it in defense position. This unfortunately means you can't reborn Traptrix Link monsters, but every other one is still a treat to get back, especially the ones with those on special summon effects. Aside from that, this card basically turns the first whole normal trap card you activate each turn into a Scrap Iron Scarecrow, which is terrifying. Some of them are already terrible enough to deal with as is. Now you have to do it twice? Thankfully, you can only pull this trick off once per turn, but it all adds up to a monster that gets scarier the longer it stays on the field. But hey, at least they have a bunch of cute little bunny rabbit things around them, right? Little bunny rabbit things that definitely aren't going to be food, right? Traptrix Adipus is a Link 3 insect monster with 1800 attack, requiring 2 or more monsters, including a plant or insect monster. While on the field, Traptrix monsters you control gain 1000 attack while you have a normal trap card in your grave. Once per turn, you can target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of insect and plant monsters you control, negate their effects until the end of this turn, then you can banish a normal trap card from your grave, and if you do, destroy one of the face-up targeted cards. Wow, this is off the charts. While I'm not sure Traptrix are at a point where turboing this out turn 1 is feasible, it is a huge payoff for holding your opponent off long enough to get this card into rotation. That 1000 attack buff though is huge, turning even your most mild-mannered Traptrix into a fighting machine, and then you just get to negate face-up cards based on your field presence. Even the trap banishing isn't that bad, because it controls the kinds of cards you have in your grave to make Treacherous Trap Hole even more effective. And while this deck is mono attribute, it's worth noting that this does mean you have a Link 3 to help make access code talker lines with maximum lethality. And really, that makes sense. After all, as a Cyberse monster, access code knows all about surfing the web. This leaves us with a few Traptrix support cards fresh from the structure deck, and they're spell cards, completely betraying the essence of the theme. But that's something they'll have to sort out with the Arbiters of the Afterlife after the Heat Death of the Universe. For now, we are covering Traptrix Allure, a normal spell card that has you discarding a level 4 insect or plant monster, or a normal trap card, to draw 2 cards. You can also banish this card from your grave, then target a banished level 4 insect or plant monster, or one of your banished normal trap cards and place it on the bottom of your deck. So now we have the archetypal Draw 2 spell, which has a huge range of discardable cards, which I like to see, that also recycles cards banished off of things like Traptrix. The trap card, not the archetype. As far as support cards go, I can see the Allure. Traptrix Orchard is a field spell card, and during your main phase, you can normal summon a Traptrix monster in addition to your normal summoner set. The first time each of your insect or plant monsters would be destroyed by battle each turn, they are instead not destroyed, and you can banish a monster you control to special summon a Traptrix monster from your hand or grave. Wow, this card is a mountain of awesome effects. The extra normal summon is stupendous, especially since Mantis searches out a Traptrix for you. The battle protection is a nifty little addition, and being able to banish a monster to summon a new one is great, because now we can steal monsters with Alumaris, and then just trade them out for one of our own monsters without incurring any incidental penalties. And it summons any Traptrix from your grave, so your links, while they're now vulnerable to trap cards, do get to apply their other effects like they never left. This is a kill on sight card, no doubt about it, which is going to be difficult since I'm pretty sure this part of the orchard is a nature preserve, and I don't need the government on my back more than they already are. Damn conservationists protecting our world's natural life and beauty! Traptrix Holtea is a normal trap card, and when activated, is special summoned in defense position as a normal level 4 earth plant monster with 400 attack and 2400 defense that is not treated as a trap card. And you can activate this card the turn it's set by discarding a normal trap card. And while in the grave, you can banish it to target a Traptrix monster in your grave and special summon it. That first effect is pretty pricey, it's basically another Vesiculo, but in reverse. Though, surprisingly, this makes for great fodder for Vesiculo to send, as it becomes a free extender in the grave. And technically, this is a whole normal trap card, which means it works with any of our other support pieces that cover that. So we'll see if something like this can really stand alongside our other impressive options. But making that comparison is a whole other video. Traptrix Traphole Nightmare is a normal trap card, and when a monster that was special summoned this turn activates its effects on your opponent's field, negate that effect, and if you do, destroy that card. Ooh, this card is brutal, especially in today's breakneck metagame where you need to have your monsters making moves or you're just falling behind. You can't afford to worry if your opponent is taking in a card from 2013, but that's what makes the swerve so satisfying. Especially if, once again, you have Rafflesia on board, because then you always threaten this. They're right, this card is a nightmare to deal with. Now, that's every card in the game with Traptrix in the name, but if you've been paying close enough attention, keeping in mind to like and subscribe because you're an expert video watcher who knows all the tricks, you know we aren't really done yet. There's a plethora of whole normal trap cards, 21 to be precise, and they can do a wide variety of things. Not all of them the good. So what I'm going to do is spend some time going over what I think are the staple cards you should look out for, then we'll have a lightning round through the rest. If any of them look fun to you, feel free to give them a try, but remember, I warned you. Bottomless Trap Hole is a normal trap card that can be activated when your opponent summons any number of monsters with 1500 or more attack. You destroy the monsters with 1500 or more attack, and if you do, banish them. This has been a mainstay for tricky players for decades now, and honestly, it's kinda hard to power creep. As the relevant baseline of attack power has risen, the more and more monsters end up meeting the threshold for Bottomless's activation, and non-targeting banishing removal runs counter to just about every monster ever built that doesn't have effect destruction protection built right in. And its almost ubiquitous coverage is even stronger in Traptrix, where you can search this early and often. Your opponent might try to investigate your board state to try and find a way around it, but alas, they'll never get to the bottom of it. Chain Hole is actually pretty interesting. You activate it when your opponent activates a monster effect in response to any card or effect activation. That effect is negated, then your opponent can banish a card from their hand or deck with the same original name as the negated card, otherwise you can banish a random card from their hand. Obviously, this runs counter to the usual triggering on some kind of summon theming, but it is technically a whole normal trap card, so it counts. Now, this card doesn't remove the card by itself, so it's not as useful against onboard negation bodies, but can still cause a random discard because your opponent's not likely to have a Borreload Savage Dragon in hand. Rather, Chain Hole is an interesting way to fight hand traps. If it's something like Ash Blossom, not only does it not go through, but your opponent then either has to give up a copy that's either in their hand or in their deck, thus robbing them of a future piece of interaction, or don't do that, in which case they still lose a random card out of their hand, or if it's chained to something like Nibiru or Psyframe Gamma, they have to either just pitch it right away, or take the chances that another card in their hand gets banished. Admittedly, a card we're going to talk about in a bit does this job better, but Chain Hole has more range to hit other cards, and for that, I'm looking forward to joining the Chain Gang. Delusion Trap Hole is a new card that came with the structure deck and can be activated at any time, provided your opponent has special summoned a monster this turn, giving you a very flexible activation window. It targets a monster your opponent controls with 2,000 or more attack, destroys it, then if you have a whole normal trap card in your grave, you can banish a monster from your opponent's grave. So if the monster you destroy has a good grave effect, you can just send it away immediately like Bottomless Trap Hole, but if a different monster is going to be more troublesome, you can banish that one instead. Because it needs to hit a monster with 2,000 attack, it unfortunately can't hit lower to the ground threats, but can still take out high impact targets while acting as grave disruption. So if you think you can get away from this matchup without an answer, then you're delusional. Floodgate Trap Hole activates when your opponent summons any number of monsters. Those monsters are changed to face down defense position, and monsters changed to face down defense position by this effect can't change their battle position. This is another really good addition, but its utility is going to be much more dependent on what kinds of decks are in your particular meta. For instance, this kicks the legs out from under most Synchro, Xyz, and Link strategies, though doesn't actually affect Link monsters themselves, just the material you would make them with, but is less functional against decks that fuse or tribute, since their material being face down isn't really a hindrance. Though, while I do agree this is a very stun-oriented card, this is definitely more on the right side of that Yu-Gi-Oh! Floodgate chart. Gravedigger's Trap Hole activates when your opponent's monster effect activates in the hand or grave, or activates when banished. You negate its effect, and if you do, inflict 2,000 damage to your opponent. Once again, this is another card that eschews the traditional summoning punishment, but because of this, it gives you some great coverage to complement your other Trap Hole cards. It handles hand traps, floating effects, except those that activate in the damage step because this does not negate the activation, or other enablers in zones that are traditionally difficult to interact with. And to keep it from being just a nuisance, you also tank a quarter of your opponent's starting life total. Heck, this can even put you in a winning situation all on its own if your opponent is at or below 2,000 life points, as your opponent will always be in danger of losing the game to a single careless activation. They'll really have a hard time digging themselves out of that hole. Treacherous Trap Hole can be activated anytime you have no trap cards in your grave, and it targets 2 monsters on the field and destroys them. In a vacuum, this is a historically tricky card to play because you're banking on having none of your other traps hit the grave before activating this, or only having a single copy of this in your deck to avoid that issue, but hardly seeing it because it's a singleton. You might also be playing some kind of banishing deck using Macro Cosmos to keep your grave clear of any traps so you can use this to the fullest, but that all got turned on its head with the introduction of Rafflesia. Now people could just play a single trap card in the form of Treacherous, then pull it out of the deck whenever they needed by way of a rank 4. It's a pretty devastating card in the right situation, being one of the strongest 2-for-1 trades you could ask for, and I sure hope we don't get another one of these, cause after all, you can see the art, 2 can get pretty cramped pretty quick. Void Trap Hole, I think, just barely squeezes into a list of cards that you should consider. It activates when your opponent special summons any number of monsters with 2,000 or more attack. You negate one of those 2,000 or more attack monsters' effects, and if you do, destroy it. Notably, it doesn't have to negate an activated effect, it just has to be an effect monster that can be negated, so normal monsters are all clear here. Another thing to keep in mind is that of the summoning punishing trap holes, this is one of 2 that actually negate the effects of the monster it destroys. However, Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare has to wait for the monster to actually activate its effects, whereas Void activates immediately. So a smart opponent could play around Trap Hole Nightmare, not quite so with Void Trap Hole. The higher attack bar does mean you won't be able to touch some of the game's best play starters, but it's hardly devoid of utility. Okay, now it's time for the lightning round. Acid Trap Hole only works on face-down defense position monsters that have 2,000 or less defense. At this point, I'd rather just run over them. Adhesion Trap Hole permanently halves the attack of affected monsters, but that stat doesn't actually mean anything outside the battle phase, so I'm gonna pass. Break Off Trap Hole is very funny, but limited to only triggering against decks that use Link monsters and might not even do anything if they set up their field properly. Chaos Trap Hole, not a normal trap. DD Trap Hole deals with a monster when it's being set, which is absolutely the last time I want to be trying to deal with a monster, so I'm not going to be including tech pieces against that. Also, why in the world do I have to banish one of my monsters? Dark Fall used to be named Dark Trap Hole due to a mistranslation, but now it doesn't work. Deep Dark Trap Hole is a legit trap hole card. Granted, there are quite a few powerful level 5 and higher effect monsters for this to work on, but this cuts out Xyz and Link monsters, so at this point it's too limiting and it's in too deep to change its ways now. Double Trap Hole is here for your super heavy samurai matchups, yay. Gemini Trap Hole is here to support your Gemini deck. What? Giant Trap Hole punishes Pendulum Summoning and little else. Link Hole isn't even a trap card. Network Trap Hole can banish monsters face down, but it only does that for monsters summoned out of the main deck or grave, so it's another example of targets being too limited to be consistently useful. Pendulum Hole, Counter Trap. Saber Hole, Counter Trap. Tachyon Chaos Hole is a Galaxy card anyway, so we can't really judge it alongside the rest of them. Time Space Trap Hole has seen competitive consideration, especially when full power pendulum summoning was a thing, and I can see this becoming relevant at some point, but now it's just another normal hole card that's too narrow, whose job can be done more consistently, though maybe not as powerfully, as other options. Basic Trap Hole got power crept a long time ago, though shoutouts to the OG, and is still pretty prevalent in older formats where it's an absolute legend. Trap Hole of Spikes is close to being usable, but having to wait until attack declaration is kinda lame. It'll only punish boss monsters, since fodder monsters are usually going to get used up as material, and most bosses have protections against stuff like this now. As for our last card, well, all I can say is L plus ratio plus your white. Alright, that's all the Traptrix cards and the whole normal trap cards, but what do we do with them? Well, if it wasn't obvious beforehand, then you're gonna have to look up Remedy Entertainment's catalog because the name of the game is Control. With a fleet of trap cards at our disposal, amazing engine cards like Sarah, and an almost infinite amount of recursion thanks to Kularia, grinding your opponent to a standstill gives you the opportunity to build up your resources before you make your opponent's life the pits. So what can we play to help them out? First, I'm gonna get this out of the way because they're all Earths, Vernisylphs. And as it so happens, their big boss also has powerful control effects. No, I am not coping, Vera is amazing. Naturia got a recent resurgence, a big part of which coming from Camellia, who can act as a Rhoda because of their ability to foolish Naturia's Sacred Tree. And while we don't have much use for the engrave effect, the on-field effect actually meshes pretty well with us, because as it turns out, our entire deck is made of level 4 earth plants and insects. Now, you're not able to trade out a plant for a plant or an insect for an insect, but you can bounce between Myrmelio and Dionea to get both of their on-special summon effects. And even outside that particular scenario, it's a great way to access your Traptrix toolbox, even if it does take a bit of finessing. Heck, while we're on the subject, being Earth attribute makes them perfect material for the Naturia Synchros. Add in a level 1 Earth tuner like Tenyi Spirit Adhara for the free special summon, and you can use Naturia Beast to ward off lightning storms, which is pretty sweet. While not specifically a Traptrix card, Traptrick is basically an honorary member of the theme, essentially acting as any normal trap card in your deck, including your hole cards, as long as you have multiple copies of them in your deck. Heck, even the banishing part is now part of the engine, as a lure can now recycle them back into your deck to set up more Traptrix. Though if you're looking for more ways to search and recycle your trap cards, Proofiness the Tactical Trapper is another, if lower impact, option. While we have a focus on whole normal trap cards, we shouldn't neglect the power of the rest of the trap card armada. The Solemn counter traps are widely powerful, most of all being Solemn Judgment, especially now that it's at 3, further helping you cement your place in the lead. Because we have a Link 1 with a downward pointing arrow, it's super easy to use Parallel Exceed, a card that's doubly useful thanks to how generic all of our Xyz monsters are. They can effortlessly set up Rafflesia to access your trap holes while providing protection, Allomeris either revives your monsters or scoops them out of your opponent's grave, or you have the new Pinguicola to search your Traptrix monsters. They also give you access to a number of utility rank 4s like Tornado Dragon and Abyss Dweller, topped off with the Zeus due to the lack of summoning restrictions in our deck, minus Arachnacampa. Lord of the Heavenly Prison also feels like a must-run in this deck. It keeps your back row from being destroyed, thus keeping your trap holes safe until they can be used, is summoned from your hand when you use one of those cards, and can replace the card with a new one if Prison was revealed when it was summoned. As for a silly tech pick, try playing some Eldritch, why don't you? Sure, it eats away at your spells and traps, but it's a piece of non-destruction removal for difficult to interact with cards, and you can trade in any of those traps for a 3500 attack monster that can pivot into being a 2800 defense wall in the future if needed. You can even attempt to summon multiple of them over the course of a couple of turns to get the material for Gustav Max, and that's a whole other Gravedigger's Trap Hole activation worth of damage right there. And that's all I have to say about Traptrix. This new structure deck is bonkers, and if the metagame shifts away from tier element supremacy, and as history has shown it will happen eventually, you're gonna have to be on the lookout for this deck. It's got huge range, an almost impossible to beat grind game, and now the power needed to close out games on the spot. So make sure you have a game plan for those creepy crawlies and creeping vines, because make no mistake, this archetype is a whole mood. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Traptrix a bottomless well of potential, or are they not that deep? And if you've gotten this far, let me know what your favorite trap hole card is. I know I dunked on a lot of them just now, but I'm positive there have been at least some niche situations where it's helped you out, so if you randomly got a lot of use out of one, I'd love to hear about how. And while you're down there, let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Cameron Berg, Chibi Gohan, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba331, Great Big Pillock, Harry, the ominous benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Manacharge, Marluxia is a Girl, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Rem T Bright, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxith Sarani, Sophie, apparently, The Fresh Prince of Conair, The Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Ariel Kersey, Bear Shark Tupo Studios, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Emily, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, Jesus Garcia, Kale the Dragon, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Neo Trinity 7, Nitromo, Sarah Lo Sulci, Shaquille Solomon, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Superpurd, Tucker Ordorn, and the legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, and get all my videos just a little bit early, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to see a video about another series of forest dwellers that are a bit less sinister, check out this video I made covering Naturia. And if you'd like to see two Yugi-tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series, Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.